back here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, and it is great to be joined by this man. Tanner Kern does absolutely incredible work at DraftKings, does a great job on the front of football, basketball, baseball, you name it, he does it. And Tanner, it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Always appreciate you. And Tanner, what did you make out of game one of the finals? Because to me, it really wasn't anything shocking. I thought that the Miami Heat, coming off of having to play a seventh game in Boston, that it was going to be a rough go of it. And honestly, I think the most shocking part to me was that the final score wasn't even more lopsided, because there's a point where the lead reached 20, and I felt like that's more indicative of how the game was, because it felt like the Denver Nuggets were a better team by more like 20 or so points rather than the final differential.
And Greg, it really shouldn't have been shocking. When you look at this Miami Heat team, and we've been saying it throughout the entire postseason, they're not that good. I'm going to say they're a little bit fraudulent. And yes, I want to give them credit for getting to the NBA Finals. They've done a tremendous job. But let's look back at their playoff resume. They barely made it out of the play-in tournament. They beat the Bucks when Giannis was injured. That gave them momentum, and they found a way to win that series. And then against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, Boston literally handed them multiple games. They said, hey, you take this game. We don't want to win it. And everyone was saying the Heat were, this team's really good, right? But I don't believe in the Disney movie narrative. I believe in the numbers and the stats. And most of the time, they back up what actually happens on the floor. And tonight we saw that. Caleb Martin was not that good. He shot 70% in Game 7 against Boston. Tonight he was a little bit of a no-show. He's not going to shoot 70% forever. He's not going to shoot 50% from the three-point line forever. We saw that tonight, right? He reverted back to the mean. We saw this entire Heat team revert back to the mean, because the bottom line is it's Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and then a bunch of undrafted free agents. That's what I look at the Miami Heat team as, and I want to give them credit for getting here. I'm not taking anything away from them, but they had the perfect storm to get here. Everything fell into place. And the Nuggets are absolutely a better team, and their run will end here. They have no answer for Nikola Jokic's size down low. They have no answer for Jamal Murray on the perimeter. They just can't simply defend everything that the Nuggets are throwing at them. And it really wasn't a surprise. I laid the point with Denver tonight, and it worked out.
Yep, and if I had $1 for every time I've heard the phrase Heat culture over the last 2 weeks, I think that I could just step away from having to do anything that would earn me money for the rest of my life, because it certainly has been something that has been coming up quite a bit. And I do take a look at Game 2, and I think that this could be a little bit more of a bounce-back spot for the Miami Heat. Not necessarily to win outright, but currently we're finding a line of 9, which is similar to what we saw in Game 1. And I did think that Game 1 was more of a butt-kicking than it represented in terms of the actual final score of 104-93. But I do think that the Miami Heat should be a little bit more acclimated, a couple more days in elevation. That should be yielding some better results for them. I do think that Eric Spoelstra is a heck of a coach, and I would give him a slight coaching advantage here. I do think that there might be a little bit more intrigue in the spread in game number 2 rather than game number 1, and I'm willing to bank on Max Strus not getting as many points as the two of us, which is 0.
Yeah, I mean, Max Strus was terrible tonight. Caleb Martin was terrible tonight, right? Jimmy Butler said in the Celtics series that these role players, they're regular guys, like they're star players. But we obviously saw tonight that they're not. Like Caleb Martin, again, shot 70% from the field against Boston in Game 7, but he's realistically like a 35% three-point shooter. Like we're not going to get those guys in this series. But again, I do like Miami to bounce back, because you look at what they did tonight. They made runs late, and it almost looked like they were going to find a way to cover. The score does not reflect how dominant the Nuggets were tonight, because they did allow Miami to crawl back in the game, but credit to them, they found a way to bounce back. I would go with Miami here. I do think, like you said, Max Strus is going to be better. I think Caleb Martin's going to be better. I don't know if you're going to get the same scoring performance out of Bam Adebayo. He was pretty good, but Jimmy Butler should be more efficient from the field. So I like Miami here. I think the Nuggets are continue to roll, but at the same time, too, Heat got to step up a little bit. I don't think they're going to get blown out in every game in the series, so I would lean more towards them with the points here.
And I do agree with you there, as Tanner Kern, who does great work at DraftKings, is joining me right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. And I did think that it was a little bit lofty that the Denver Nuggets were minus 400 to be able to win the series coming in, and I thought that it was a appropriate price. It was just one of those cases where it's like, yeah, I don't necessarily have a lot of reason to be laying this big of a number. I would like to find a way to be able to mitigate the juice a little bit more. And now the series, it is even more demonstrative than this. Is there any way that you're looking to attack the series as a whole, whether it comes to any sort of futures, maybe like an alternate game spread, anything like that?
So, going back to the game spread, it was -1.5 in favor of the Nuggets, and that was like -180 juice. And that's just simply something I don't want to play there. -2.5, you're only getting it for about +110. So I really stayed away from futures, and I decided to commit to props in this series and spreads when I feel like playing them. Tonight I went with the Nuggets. I'll potentially go with the Heat at +9. If I don't like that, I'll honestly stay away there. But when I look at series props moving forward, something to look at now is exact correct score. So exact correct score could be very, very valuable moving forward.
Yep, I do agree with you there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So.
When it comes to the exact correct score, by the way, that you were mentioning, the Nuggets to be able to win by a count of 4-1, that's at +215, and the Nuggets at +330. And I think that that's something that is very appealing because you mentioned it. If you even go with a game spread of like -2.5, you're barely finding that at a plus price. And if you think that it's going to be some sort of a gentleman's sweep, I think that might be a good way to be able to take a look at it.
Yeah, I think 4-1, 4-2 in that range. You can honestly go with both and find a way to profit there. I like 4-1 based on what I saw tonight. Going into the series, I was more looking at potentially a 4-2. I thought that he could do something. I only think they steal one game. Take that 4-1 here. I do believe Denver's going to win game 2. The Heat should steal one at home. I don't know which one it's going to be yet, but I know Jimmy Butler is going to have that Jimmy Butler game where he drops 40 points and he does lead the Heat to a win. So there's going to be their victory at home. And then when it comes down to it, game 5 should be that closeout game for Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. So that's the best way to attack the series props right now. And then again, I think prop betting is probably going to be your best bet and your most profitable option throughout this series.
Yep, no question about it, because I do take a look at these props that are on the board for game number 3 as well. So you've already got the player props out there in terms of points, rebounds, what have you. And I was thinking coming into game 1 that a lot of unders were going to be a good option because I was taking a look at someone like Mr. Martin, who had been doing a great job in that Boston Celtics series. And typically in the prop market, you want to be buying low and selling high on a lot of these guys. And he went under on darn near everything. So that was very valuable. And you just take a look at this series and feel like maybe some of these props are a little bit too elevated in terms of scoring, because I thought that the 219 total that we saw in game number 1, that was a little bit too high at 214 and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think that we're getting to more of a appropriate number when it comes to this total. But just with the way that the Miami play in general, which is one of the slowest just tempos in general in the NBA, I do think that there is a lot of value to take a look at some of these unders, whether that be a full game or some of these player props.
Yeah, unders have been very lucrative for the Miami Heat this season just because of the way they play basketball, as you said. I think when you look at this series overall, if you believe the Miami Heat can stay in it, it's really going to lead to an under because they're going to require the Nuggets to not score as much. Now, how do you stop Nikola Jokic? That's the question. I don't know if Miami's going to have the team to do that or the strategy to do that, quite frankly. But unders are definitely a move if you like Miami to be in the series. Now, honestly, unders could be the move if you don't like Miami to be in the series because they're not going to be able to hang with the Nuggets, and that's going to lead to an under as well. As we saw tonight, Denver came out. They were very efficient from the field. They did everything that was needed for them. And Miami was unable to hang with them, which ultimately led to an under here. So I think unders are going to be your best bet in this series. For props-wise, you obviously want to look at Nikola Jokic assists, Nikola Jokic points, Nikola Jokic rebounds, because that's what he does, right? I don't see the Heat finding a guy that's going to shut him down. As good as Bam Adebayo was on offense, it did not affect him. It did not affect Nikola Jokic on defense tonight when he was playing, right? Nikola Jokic was able to find assists all over the floor. He was able to score when he wanted to, and he got his rebound. So another triple-double from him, that's something to look at. Jamal Murray is locked in. And then I think if you want to bet something for the Heat, it's going to be Jimmy Butler points, because the Jimmy Butler game is coming at some point. We don't know when it's going to be. It wasn't tonight, but my bet would be to have Jimmy Butler bounce back in game 2. So potentially look at that prop market there.
And advice as well is take a look at just the juice that you get in terms of some of the specific Nikola Jokic rebound assist props as well, because I'm seeing his triple-double, yes, is a minus 135. If you're able to get like over 10.5 assists at more reasonable juice, that's something that you probably want to take a look at as well, because this guy has been absolutely tremendous. And what else is tremendous is talking with Tanner Kern of DraftKings. He does a great job, a little bit of everything. We talked some NBA. Now let's dive into the Friday MLB card with him next, right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN. Tremendous work over at DraftKings, taking a look at a little bit of everything. And Tanner, this is a game that I was talking about a little bit earlier in the hour. It is the Pittsburgh Pirates and the St. Louis Cardinals with Captain Jack Flaherty on the mound. The Pittsburgh Pirates, they throw out their own Contreras, and I think you're going where I'm going with this one. Total opened up at 9. Now we're seeing it at 9.5 in some spots. And with the Cardinals, they're right around about minus 130 to minus 133 or so favorites. Just a case where with the Pittsburgh Pirates, such a good start to the season, but they were the lowest scoring team in the National League. And man, I think that they're going to continue to struggle to score here in this one.
I do think they're going to continue to struggle to score, and I'm going to be on the Cardinals here. I look at Jack Flaherty on the mound. Has not delivered like we've expected Jack Flaherty to this season, but overall, I think he can get the job done against the Pittsburgh Pirates. You and me were just joking about this. There was a time when the Pirates were actually good at baseball, and that time has come and gone. So if I can get the price of the Cardinals at minus 130, it's obviously worth taking in this spot. Flaherty 4.81 compared to Roansy Contreras with a 4.33. Both guys have similar whips. Contreras is slightly better here, but Flaherty owns the strikeout numbers, and I think that is where the Cardinals are going to shine in this spot here. Offensively, Cardinals have hit 76 home runs compared to the Pirates with 53. They have a slightly better OBP, better average, and they scored about 30 more runs this season. Have not been that good in their past 5 games, struggling against bad teams, so I don't want to say this is a lock by any means, but for minus 130, I'm going to take the Cardinals in this spot. 13-16 on the road, not good, but the Pirates aren't that good at home either at 12-13. So take a chance on St. Louis right now, because if I had to pick one of these teams, I'm going with the Cardinals.
Yep, and with the Pittsburgh Pirates as well, they were throwing Roansy Contreras out of the bullpen last week as well. So, got to wonder if you're going to be able to get necessarily great length there. And for Captain Jack Flaherty, not been a good year, but you know what? 3 runs or fewer surrendered in each out of his last 4 starts. So, perhaps he's turning a corner there. We are in lockstep on that one. Now, let's dive into one where we might be disagreeing a little bit more, because that always makes things fun, as we've got the Washington Nationals going up against the Philadelphia Phillies. Zach Wheelan and Dylan Wheeler is on the bump for the Phillies, and Josiah Gray goes for the Nats. Nats are around plus 150 to plus 160, between minus 165 to as high as a minus 190 is your number on the Philadelphia Phillies. And Josiah Gray is pitched above his head, no question about it. He's got a sub at 2.75 ERA. Fielding independent is more around a 4, but Zach Wheeler, he's always had his struggles on the road, and with the Philadelphia Phillies, it's one of those things where I need to see the offense develop a little bit of power before I'm willing to trust in them at this big of a number. Take me through this one, because I do think that with the Washington Nationals, certainly it's not a great team, but I like the fact that they don't strike out very much.
So I am willing to take the Phillies on the run line in this spot, and the main reason for that is I think Josiah Gray has gotten very lucky. His walks are tremendous. He walked 6 people 2 starts ago against the Detroit Tigers, went 5 innings, and only gave up 3 hits with 1 earned run. If you walk 6 guys in a start, it's going to come back to bite you in the you-know-what eventually. We can go back to 2 starts before that. He walked 4 people. Even his last start, he walked 3 people, right? So when I look at these numbers, he's gotten lucky. His ERA is only at a 2.77, which is pretty miraculous considering how high his walk rate is. The strikeout numbers aren't there. The thing about Zach Wheeler is the strikeout numbers are there. 76 Ks in 65 innings. So if he does get into trouble, I see him pulling himself out of it, especially against a weak Washington Nationals offense. When you look at the Nats, 44 homers compared to the Phillies at 56. So as bad as Philadelphia's offense has been this season, they've still shown up at a higher level than the Nationals. Same thing goes for slugging percentage, OBP, and all that. I'll take take the Nationals. I'll take the Phillies, I should say, against the Nationals on the run line here, just because they've dominated in the key categories. And I do think Josiah Gray is going to get what he's going to get. He's going to get not bombed, but when you're walking people, you're going to get in trouble eventually. I think this is a good spot for it.
Yep, it could be one of those death by a million cuts sort of circumstance with him, as the Phillies do a good job of moving the line. They just need to find a little bit of power outside of Kyle Schwarber. And to your point on this game, it would be either a take on the run line of the favorite, or else you take the big plus money line price, because laying this sort of a number with the Philadelphia Phillies, it becomes a case where the juice sometimes is a little bit too much to squeeze, unless if you really think it's going to be a one-run game and that run line gets relatively lofty when you're taking a run and a half. So I do agree with you trying to reduce the juice there on the Philadelphia Phillies, as we do have Tanner Kern, who does great work over at DraftKings, joining me right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. And when it comes to this total, I don't understand why you open up at 8.5. We've got the Seattle Mariners taking on the Texas Rangers. We've got John Gray, and as I like to call him, 55 Shades of John Gray, going in for the Texas Rangers, and Luis Castillo on the bump for Seattle. And we have seen quite a few books go from an 8 to an 8.5, which I think is pretty much where this total should be. And with Seattle, they're between about minus 118 to a minus 120. When it comes to Seattle, I don't think that they're going to go to a 0-0 score going into the 10th inning like they did in their last game, but been very impressed by Luis Castillo. For John Gray, I do think that there's negative regression coming for him, and with the Rangers, they certainly have been a high-scoring team, but I think there's a little bit of regression coming for this Rangers offense. I like the way that Seattle has been able to roll with their bullpen as well.
Yeah, Gray has struggled keeping the ball in the yard, but I do like him to be decent in this spot. He's been decent all season, 1.1 whip. That's very good, 2.8 ERA. And he's going against Luis Castillo, who I like to call Baby Pedro, 2.69 ERA, the .99 whip. I got some nicknames too, Greg. You've been dominating tonight with the 50 Shades of Gray and the Captain
55 Shades of John Gray.
55 Shades. Okay, there you go. So you got a lot of nicknames too, but I do like the under in this spot. We haven't seen the Mariners offense come to fruition yet this season, and Texas has been high scoring, but they're going to have trouble with Castillo. Castillo's amazing. He locates. He's got a good fastball, and his breaking ball is so hard to locate. So I think Texas, we're going to see a little regression offensively. Again, both these teams have very good power numbers, but the Mariners have struggled to get on base as well. So that gives John Gray an advantage right there. I'm going to play the under of 8.5 runs. I think this is just simply too high for the pitching matchup that you're getting, in the fact that the Mariners offense has not come around yet.
Now, I don't have a bad nickname for this guy or anything like that, but I will say I do think that there's a pitcher in this matchup that's going to get taken hook, line, and sinker. Chris Bassett goes for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think you see what I did there. And for the New York Mets, it's Justin Verlander, not the guy that I think is going to be getting taken hook, line, and sinker, going for the Mets. And the Mets, they're between about a minus 135 to a minus 140 favorite. Total is about 8.5. Where do you stand on this one? Because with the Toronto Blue Jays, I take a look at the underlying numbers of Chris Bassett, and having watched him in person, he just does not seem to be comfortable with the pitch clock. His walks are up, his strikeouts are down, yet his ERA is relatively on par with what we've seen last season. Now, I will say, for Chris Bassett, last two starts, he has given up a combined 13 runs, so it does feel like that regression is starting to come. I think that the regression, it continues, though, here with the Mets team that finally feels like they've woken up with their bats.
Yeah, 11 home runs and 26 walks in 66 innings for Bassett. So that's the number to look at there. This is an over 8.5 smash it kind of game. When you look at Bassett, again, like you said, I think we're going to see a little bit of regression. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see the chink in the armor for him. And I do believe the Mets offense is going to wake up in this spot and continue to hit the baseball as we've seen over the past few games. And then you look at Justin Verlander. And with Justin Verlander, he's 2-2 with a 4.8 ERA. He's got 22 Ks on the season. Has not thrown a lot of innings, obviously, but he is getting hit. And that's kind of concerning if you're the Mets and you just signed Justin Verlander. When I look at him, he's been up and down. Some starts he's going to come out and be decent. Other starts he's going to give up 6 runs. So I'm going to bank on closer to the 6 runs against the Toronto Blue Jays. They got guys like Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero Jr., Matt Chapman, guys that are hitting the ball all over the yard. And we were talking about before the show, I don't believe their offense has fully come to fruition yet either. They had 333 OBP, but only 64 home runs. And this team is way better than that number. So look for a lot of balls to be leaving the yard in the Bronx. I think both teams are going to contribute to this total, and it's going to get way over 8.5 runs early, and there's going to be a lot of runs scored often.
And being able to get Justin Verlander at right around about at minus 135 or so, that's actually a cheap price, my opinion as well. Yeah. Typically, when you see a former Cy Young Award winner at that price, that's something that you're going to be paying a little bit more of a tax for. And typically, we have to pay a tax for great guests like you, Tanner, but you're able to cut us in once again. I always do appreciate the time. You do great work at DraftKings, breaking down a little bit of everything, and I know that you always do a great job of gauging both the NBA and the MLB front, so really do appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for having me. Let's see if the bets can hit.
Absolutely. Tanner Kern does absolutely tremendous work.